On this episode of A History of Film, we will explore the wonderful magic of special effects and their relevance within the motion pictures. Today, we will be looking at special effects as an art form, what inspired it, those who influenced it, and the progressions that created it. This is A History of Film. Special effects. It has existed for as long as theater and film has been around. Many of the mechanics and techniques that we see nowadays were inspired by innovations that had occurred during the time of the Greeks and Romans, as well as during the medieval and Italian Renaissance periods. The Greeks were responsible for pioneering four primary innovations. One was called the mechane. The mechane was the early Greek word for machine and machinery. The mechane, or machine, was a crane that was used in Greek theater, predominantly in the 5th and 4th centuries BC. Fashioned out of wood in a pulley system, its primary function was used to lift actors and props into the air, representing flight. It would often be used to bring gods onto the stage from up above, which gave birth to the well-known Latin term Deus ex machina, meaning God out of the machine. The second Greek innovation was called the ikliama. This was a wheeled platform that was used to roll actors and sets on stage during a scene. The third was the skene. The skene was the structure at the back of a theater stage, initially a very light structure, or just cloth hanging from a rope, which connected the background building to the set as a whole. And finally, we have the periactos, that was used to display rapidly changing scenes, such as a shift from day to night. While the Romans used a lot of the similar things the Greeks invented, they also came up with many improved versions of most of the Greek effects, as well as coming up with their own set of magic. The most popular idea they had was the invention of trapdoors. These trapdoors allowed actors to appear and disappear at any given time during the production. This gimmick left many audiences amazed. During the medieval period, there was a much heavier focus in religion, primarily the ideals of Catholicism, so props depicting religious iconography became featured. A distortion and manipulation of lights were one of the most commonly used props to represent angels and other celestial kinds of beings. The lights were a tough feat to pull off during a time period long before the advent of electricity. There was also the use of a pulley system, which had been perfected during this time, even used as water mechanisms, making the stage appear as flooded. During the Italian Renaissance, puppets, costumes, and makeup became more and more popular. The depictions of monsters would often be created as large puppets, or even actors inside handcrafted suits and/or in makeup. The advances in this particular area of special effects went a long way towards giving off a look of realism to the monster illusions. Centuries would pass until the birth of cinema arrived in the early 1900s. There were many great classic films that would go on to help propel cinema from its infancy to a viable and integral part of society. There arguably wasn't a more famous film at the time than the 1902 French silent film directed by Georges Méliès titled A Trip to the Moon. It became renowned in part due to its stellar use of special effects. One of them was the first known use of miniature models and set pieces. That kind of forward-thinking and idea is still a very popular one still used today, even with the existence of computerized graphics. In 1927, Fritz Lang's Metropolis would take cues from A Trip to the Moon, and also extensively use miniatures to create a city and urban environments within a futuristic setting and landscape. The robots featured in the film are also minute 1933. A massive beast is born. He terrorized a native tribe and ultimately New York City. He climbed all the way to the top of the Empire State Building, while carrying his beloved in his hand before being gunned down to his death. The original tale of King Kong would go on to become a beautifully written and produced cinematic classic. The sight of such a massive gorilla stepping on people and cars as he made his way down NYC's Madison Avenue left audiences shocked and stunned by what they were seeing, and they loved every second of it. Rotten Tomatoes has it ranked as the greatest horror movie of all time, distinction many would find hard to dispute. There were many factors that went into the original King Kong film that made it so unique and one of a kind. Perhaps none more so than the use of a technique called stop motion. By taking and combining every snapshot of every single movement made by an otherwise inanimate object, or in this case, the inanimate character of King Kong, and putting them together would create one continuous shot of the object or character in a single film or scene. It was a brilliant tactic in the earliest days of filmmaking, a tactic that brought us another seemingly massive beast, perhaps more terrifying and larger than King Kong. The beast terrified Hong Kong and wrought death and destruction with the ability to breathe fire. It was called Godzilla. Although the gradual use of stop motion was often a daunting process to pull off, but when done correctly, it would pay off enormous dividends. While King Kong brought the technique front and center, it wasn't the first known film to make use of this stop motion technique. William O'Brien's A Lost World was the first instance in which this was known to be used. The stop motion tactic became so popularized in a resounding way that it would go on to lay groundwork for the inclusion of technical awards, such as Best Visual Effects at award shows. There comes a point during a scene or a movie when an actor's general appearance is changed dramatically. The best and perhaps obvious means to make that change is through the gradual use of makeup and extensive use of costumes. With or without the proper use of costumes and or makeup, an actor's performance can be quickly improved or vastly diminished. So proper costuming and makeup effects always need to be perfectly on point. Both forms of these visual transformations tell exactly who or what a character is, based off what they are wearing and how they look and are perceived. It can be amazing what these special effects can do. They can turn the youngest of characters into a very older version of themselves, or make one character appear extremely clean and classy in one instance, and a filthy, bloodied mess in another. The effect of using makeup had such an impact in filmmaking that after Anthony Hopkins' bizarre transformation as Joseph Merrick in the 1980 movie The Elephant Man, fans demanded for the inclusion of a category for best makeup effects at award shows. Eventually, it happened not long after. Although miniatures and makeup are hallmarks of special effects, there is one specific special effect that has been used since the beginning of theater itself to the present day: sound. Originally, in theatrical performances, there were just a few choir boys singing by the stage, which acted as a chorus. However, as the rise of the motion picture and cinema drew closer, many silent films relied on background musical scores to entertain their audiences. It wasn't until the 1927 film The Jazz Singer that changed the way movies were viewed. Before that, there had only been a very select number of films in which the audiences could actually hear spoken lines. After the success of The Jazz Singer, every single studio was pushing to replicate the success. The ensuing success with films with sound would ultimately render the silent film era obsolete. The incorporation of sound within movies also paved the way for newer and innovative technological advances that would add additional support and enhancements to sound quality. Features like body microphones were beginning to be used as a way to listen in and hear what the actors were saying on stage or on set. Body mics would eventually be replaced with the more practical and modernized boom mics that we use today. The advent of the boom mic was a tremendous advancement within the burgeoning field of special effects. Another kind of innovation that spawned with the ability to incorporate sound within a motion picture was the ability to synchronize sound. With sound synchronization, pre-recorded sounds and speech could be put into graphic pictures, such as cartoons. Those sounds would then be synced up in a way that would make a cartoon character appear as if they were speaking. The first known motion picture to use this was a classic cartoon titled Steamboat Willie, Steamboat Willie would ultimately go on to blaze a massive trail for the cartoons of today. Computer-generated imagery, better known as CGI, revolutionized special effects like nothing before. The first attempt of using CGI was in 1961 in a 30-second video titled Rendering of a Planned Highway. In it, a car is seen traveling down a road. Although CGI had been around for quite some time, the 1973 film Westworld was the first film to use CGI. Eventually, the likes of Star Wars and Star Trek made CGI pretty commonplace. 1995. An animated film was released and became a record-breaking blockbuster smash hit at the box office. The film would have a major impact that would forever change the animation genre and special effects alike. It wasn't like any other feature-length animated film ever done before. It was new and very uniquely done. That is because, unlike the typical animated status quo, Toy Story was filmed using a newer form of animation. Everything about Toy Story was done using digital computerized graphic imagery. This was made possible thanks to the brilliant mind of John Lasseter and his animation team, as well as the technological leaps in computer science. But it wasn't until Toy Story came along and became the first ever feature-length film to be done in 100% CGI. The animated film raked in a $362 million box office payday and put a then previously little-known animation studio company called Pixar on the map. Pixar would go on to create many CGI animated classics, such as A Bug's Life, WALL-E, Up, The Incredibles, Inside Out, and most recently, the Finding Nemo sequel, Finding Dory. Motion capture is another form of CGI that has been improved on in the past few years. For example, while a lot of makeup was used to create the looks and green skin of the character of Gamora and the hulking gray and red look of Drax, the Destroyer, in Marvel's cinematic hit Guardians of the Galaxy, other much complicated characters had to be made with the use of motion capture. Andy Serkis is arguably the king of this art form, with his portrayal of Gollum in the Lord of the Rings series, and Caesar in the new Planet of the Apes film series. The gradual use of motion capture is part of the reason why James Cameron's 2009 film, Avatar, is the highest grossing movie of all time, and why 4 more sequels are underway. On the flip side, motion capture does not always look aesthetically appealing. Perhaps one of the worst uses of CGI motion capture has to be the movie The Green Lantern, starring Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds was able to share the laughing-stock image and make everyone forgive his lackluster performance as Hale Jordan with the smash hit success of a different superhero movie called Deadpool, even going as far as making fun of the costume in that same movie. Due to the overinflation of CGI in movies, excluding animated ones, a debate had arisen and has sparked numerous arguments as to whether filmmakers should keep on making heavy use of special effects in large-scale films, such as Transformers, or dial back and use more practical effects, like in the film Mad Max Fury Road, for example. Many proponents in favor of using practical effects argue that the effects look more realistic and convincing on screen. Although, aside from a few minor touch-ups, editors won't have to spend precious time editing in effects that are already there, so they can continue to focus on creating a more cohesive story. Furthermore, you can change the weather with practical effects by manipulating lights, fog machines, and/or water pipes to create any type of artificial atmospheric conditions. Those in favor of excessive use of CGI state that it's more convenient depending on the context. They state that it helps create an atmosphere that simply could not be created by the use of practical effects. The major drawback, however, is that some films end up relying too much on CGI, and in turn lose any credibility it would hope to have with the audience. If the CGI is not perfect in any given film or show, sometimes even the smallest of details could harm an otherwise outstanding movie or scene. Since the earliest days of theater, special effects have always been a part of the experience in some form or another. As we continue through time, we saw how just a few pulley systems influenced early cinema through today. The impact of special effects will forever be a lasting one. They continue to evolve every day. New forms of effects are constantly being brought forth. They continue to wow audiences all around the world with their amazing technological advancements, such as three-dimensional viewing, something that has audiences one step closer to feeling like they're right there in the movie alongside their favorite actors and actresses. James Cameron's Avatar may never have happened had it not been for the Greeks' invention of the skene.